The Biber was a compact one-man midget submarine developed by Nazi Germany during the final and most critical phase of World War II, when the balance of power at sea had decisively shifted in favor of the Allies. Conceived under the direction of the Kriegsmarine in 1944, the Biber was part of a broader strategy that relied on small, unconventional naval weapons to compensate for the severe losses suffered by the German fleet. The idea was to produce a simple, inexpensive, and quickly deployable submarine that could be operated by a single individual, allowing for mass production and rapid deployment with minimal training requirements. The urgency of the situation, however, meant that the design was rushed into service without adequate testing, which ultimately compromised its reliability and effectiveness in combat situations. Technically, the Biber was about 9 meters long, with a displacement of roughly 6.5 tons, making it one of the smallest operational submarines ever deployed in wartime. Its propulsion system consisted of a petrol engine for surface navigation and an electric motor when submerged, a combination that was standard in larger submarines but particularly challenging to manage in such a confined space. The vessel could reach a speed of approximately 6.5 knots on the surface and around 5 knots underwater, with an operational range of about 100 nautical miles on the surface, though in practice this range was often reduced by mechanical inefficiencies. It was armed with 2 externally mounted torpedoes, which limited hydrodynamic efficiency but simplified the internal design. The cockpit was extremely cramped, barely accommodating the pilot, who had to control navigation, depth, propulsion, and weapons systems simultaneously, often in near darkness and under intense psychological pressure. One of the most critical weaknesses of the Biber was its mechanical unreliability. The petrol engine frequently emitted toxic fumes, which could accumulate inside the cockpit and incapacitate the pilot, a problem exacerbated by poor ventilation. Furthermore, the submarine's buoyancy and trim systems were difficult to control, making it unstable underwater and prone to accidental dives or surfacing. Many Bibers were lost due to these technical issues rather than enemy action, and survival rates among pilots were alarmingly low. Despite these flaws, around 300 units were produced, reflecting the desperate need for any form of naval resistance during the war's final months. Operationally, the Biber saw limited success. Missions were often launched from coastal bases in occupied Europe, particularly in areas like the Netherlands, with the goal of attacking Allied shipping in the English Channel. However, the combination of poor reliability, limited training, and strong Allied defenses meant that most missions failed to achieve significant results. In many cases, Bibers never reached their targets or were detected and destroyed before they could launch their torpedoes. Nonetheless, the concept behind the Biber demonstrated a form of asymmetric warfare that would later influence post-war naval design in various countries. Among the more curious aspects of the Biber is the fact that despite being intended as a stealth weapon, it was relatively noisy due to its engine, making it easier to detect than anticipated. Additionally, pilots often had only a few weeks of training, sometimes even less, before being sent on dangerous missions, highlighting the extreme urgency and desperation of Germany's wartime situation. Another interesting detail is that the Biber had very limited navigation equipment, forcing pilots to rely heavily on basic instruments and visual estimation, especially during night operations. Today, surviving examples of the Biber can be found in museums, where they stand as powerful symbols of both human ingenuity and the extreme conditions that drive technological experimentation in times of war.